Welcome to another episode of Responsible AI in Action. I'm your host, Charles Dimov, CMO of Comma AI, the leader in responsible AI technology. And with me today, I have Dr. Michael Sherbert, an Indigenous scholar, researcher, and postdoctoral fellow at Queen's University. Dr. Sherbert's work explores the intersection of AI ethics, technology, religion, culture, accessibility, and Indigenous worldviews. Michael is also the author of Deconstructing Transhumanism, A Religion Without Religion. In his book, he examines the deeper ideological narratives shaping modern AI and emerging technologies. His perspectives bring an important and thought-provoking lens to how we think about responsible AI today. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Michael, so why don't we dive right in? Much of the responsible AI discussion today really focuses on current issues like bias, hallucinations, governance, and human insight, oversight, that is. Now, your work points to something a little bit deeper than just that, the underlying narratives and the assumptions shaping AI development itself. Why is it important to examine these deeper foundations?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say much of responsible AI focuses on bias, governance, and oversight. And those are essential, don't get me wrong. My work specifically, however, it focuses a little bit more on going a little deeper than that by examining the assumptions that shape AI before those issues even come to emerge. So if we only focus on bias or oversight, we're treating symptoms and not causes per se. So AI is not neutral. It's shaped by stories and assumptions about intelligence, progress, and the future of humanity. These assumptions influence what gets built, what is valued, and who benefits. I would say many of these assumptions, particularly in Western contexts, are not new. They're shaped by long-standing cultural and religious inheritances. So in my work, I argue that transhumanism carries forward secularized versions of Christian ideas about transcendence, salvation, and the transformation of the human. And these ideas increasingly inform how AI is imagined and developed. So if we don't interrogate that deeper layer, responsible AI risks becoming largely superficial, fixing immediate problems while reinforcing deeper, often invisible cultural and ideological frameworks. So responsible AI is not just technical or regulatory, it's philosophical in many ways. So it asks not just what is the system fair, but what vision of the human and the future is being advanced here?
That's I find that a fascinating perspective because I've been interviewing a number of different people in the industry for, over the past year. And interestingly enough, most of the time we're very focused on here's how we deploy it. Look at what's happening in the industry. Look at all these things. And I seldom have the opportunity to really kind of think philosophically about it to say, hey, where are some of these assumptions coming from? And how is what's guiding us in the development of this technology? So interesting perspective, very interesting perspective. And I'm starting to see the second part of your book as to or sorry, not the second part of the book, but the second part of the title of the book, Religion Without Religion. Okay, that's starting to make a little bit more sense. So that's curious. So let me jump into the next question now. Michael, you've written extensively about transhumanism. Now, for those of us who only may know the term very loosely, how would you explain what exactly is transhumanism and why does it matter in the context of modern AI developments? Or does it matter at all, in fact?
Another great question. Transhumanism, first, is very varied and broad set of ideas, but generally speaking, it's a movement centered on using technology to enhance human capacities. So extending life, increasing intelligence, and potentially moving beyond biological limitations of our own bodies, for example. At its core, the idea that human limitations, especially mortality, vulnerability, and dependency, are problems to be solved. So this matters for AI because many assumptions driving AI development today align with transhumanist thinking. So the emphasis on optimization, prediction, and augmentation reflects a broader narrative of transcending the human condition. But these are not just individual beliefs. They operate at the level of culture and of industry. So transhumanist ideas are embedded in the broader tech ecosystem, especially in AI, shaping what is imagined, funded, and built. So even when AI developers don't identify as transhumanists explicitly, they are often still working within a framework shaped by those ideas through cultural assumptions and ideological narratives that circulate through the tech industry. So these frameworks shape how intelligence is defined, what problems matter, and what futures are seen as desirable. So the importance of understanding transhumanism and other ideological influences within the Western tech industry reveals that AI is ultimately not neutral and that it's part of a broader ideological landscape that actively shapes what gets built, how it's used, and the futures that we can imagine for ourselves forward.
That's pretty interesting. And I recall from you and I chatting previously that yeah, part of that transhumanism is that concept of the singularity that kind of comes in that at some point in time we upload our consciousness into the broader AI machine someplace out there, the cloud, whatever one might think of it. And so again, interesting perspective. And yeah, and again, it is one of those interesting things that you don't. I mean, when we're in business, we're not often thinking about that type of thing. As hey, that's kind of guiding where we're going with this technology. So again, interesting perspective and good questions that you're basically bringing them up. So on the next question that I had for you, your book describes transhumanism as, and I referred to this a little earlier, a religion without religion. So what exactly do you mean about that?
Yeah. So when I describe transhumanism as a religion without religion, arguing that it does not emerge in a vacuum, but it emerges from a deeply Western framework shaped by Christianity, especially. So these Christian narratives of transcendence, salvation, and the transformation of the human are very much present and are a very powerful influence. So in my work, I argue that these religious structures haven't disappeared, but they've been largely secularized. So instead of salvation through God, for example, we see salvation through technology. Instead of eternal life in a religious sense, we see visions of radical life extension or digital immortality after we've uploaded our consciousness onto digital substrates or silicon substrates. So instead of spiritual transcendence, we see the idea of surpassing the human through these technological means. So these ideas are especially visible in transhumanist discussions of the singularity, right? So where technology becomes the vehicle for a kind of ultimate transformation of humanity at large, from societal perspective, but also from an individual perspective regarding our bodies and our capabilities as well. So what matters for responsible AI then is that these are not abstract ideas. They actively shape technological development. So in Silicon Valley, for instance, these narratives shape how the future is imagined. And we increasingly see prominent figures in AI, Ray Kurzweil, Google, Sam Altman, OpenAI, and of course, Elon Musk, articulating various versions of these ideas, sometimes explicitly, sometimes more implicitly. So religion without religion names how these religious patterns continue to operate beneath the surface, shaping both AI development and the ethical frameworks used to evaluate AI. So if we don't recognize this, we risk treating these visions of the future as inevitable rather than as one particular and contestable set of beliefs.
That's a really good point because again, I suppose the problem with seeing things as inevitable is that you stop questioning them. You stop, you know, yeah, I guess the questioning part is probably the most important element of just saying, hey, you know what, is this the right direction? Is this the right thing to do? Or could we improve this? Could we change this, et cetera? So again, interesting perspective. I think where I will draw that back to business, for example, is a lot of times, we get a mandate and we just sort of well, okay, I'm not going to say completely blindly, but a lot of times you do sort of just say, okay, I got my mandate. This is what we're going to do. Don't question it. Just go for it. And so, so again, it's good that you're bringing these up as questions and reminding us that, hey, we should be questioning things. I mean, not everything. Of course, you won't be able to get anywhere if you're questioning everything continually, but at least the intelligent things that you should be questioning. So interesting point. Now, my next question is about the fascinating arguments that AI development is not neutral. You mentioned that it carries that hidden ideological and cultural assumptions. You've kind of mentioned the religious backing, the Western philosophy, etc. What are some of the most important assumptions you think that are shaping AI systems today, and the way we talk about them as well?
Yeah, so AI, even Western technology in general, it's often presented as neutral, right? It's science is presented as neutral, but at the same time, these are deeply shaped by cultural and ideological assumptions, many of which align back to transhumanism with that style of thinking. So some of the most significant points I could make here would be that optimization becomes a primary value. So the belief that more efficient systems are inherently better without questioning what that efficiency actually goes towards serving. Another one would be, say, control over uncertainty. So a drive to predict and manage the world, often at the expense of respecting complexity or ambiguity. So what happens is AI can often flatten answers or perspectives or ideas rather than presenting a varied idea or answers that have been presented in other ways. It's trying to get this one certain answer rather than representing the vast complexity of the answer. Enhancement is another one as inherently good. The assumption that increasing capability, whether it be human or machine, is always desirable. And the one that I focus on especially in my book is technological inevitability. So the idea that certain technological futures, such as the singularity, are inevitable and therefore beyond question or beyond intervention. So that point is particularly important because when these futures are framed as inevitable, they become difficult to contest. This is a form of what in academia you would call technological determinism, and that subtly removes human agency from the equation. It suggests that we are simply moving toward a predetermined future rather than actively shaping it. So what my work adds is that these are not just technical preferences. They are part of a broader narrative about transcendence and progress with deep roots in Western thought, especially Western and religious thought. So responsible AI needs to move beyond just correcting bias within these systems. And it needs to also begin to interrogate the values and the narratives being encoded into the AI. And it needs to interrogate these values and narratives also from an industry perspective, a cultural perspective. So it's very complex. It's not just about the product of AI and what it's doing, but it's how it goes into how companies and people shape AI and what they believe AI can do.
Yeah, Michael, given that comma AI, frankly, we are founded by and largely funded by the an indigenous founder and the indigenous community, which again is fascinating, and that's a great thing. But it also brings some good perspectives into light in terms of how we've been developing this AI technology from our side, at the very least. Now, how might indigenous perspectives challenge or maybe even reframe that the assumptions that you've talked about that are behind the transhumanist approach to AI? What are your thoughts along that line?
Yeah, so indigenous perspectives have the potential to offer a very powerful counterpoint to many of the assumptions that underlie transhumanist approaches to AI and Western approaches more generally. So where transhumanism often emphasizes transcendence, many indigenous worldviews emphasize relationality, interdependence, and responsibility. And this would be to community, to the land, and to future generations as well. So instead of asking how AI can help us overcome human limitations, indigenous perspectives might ask, how can AI support and sustain relationships with humanity and our environment and everything that lives within it. So instead of prioritizing control, prediction, there's a greater respect for what cannot or should not be fully known. This also challenges the idea that the body is something to be surpassed. So in many indigenous frameworks, the body is not a limitation, but it's a site of connection to the land, to history, and to our communities. So in my current work, engaging with various indigenous communities, I see this not as a rejection of AI, but to use it as an invitation to rethink AI. So from a responsible AI perspective then, this opens up the possibility of more plural views. So of designing systems that are not driven by a single dominant worldview, but that reflect multiple ways of understanding intelligence, ethics, and the future. So importantly, this kind of reframing doesn't only come from outside Western traditions. There are also alternative perspectives within Western religious traditions and philosophical traditions that challenge dominant assumptions about progress, about transcendence, and the human. And this, I think, further reinforces the need for a more pluralistic and critically reflective approach to AI.
Right. That's good. This has been a fascinating conversation. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. This has been absolutely thought-provoking, sometimes philosophical, sometimes metaphysical ideas here, but definitely kind of talking on the deeper narratives of that are basically shaping AI's future, which is pretty important because this is shaping everybody's future right now. This has been a fascinating discussion into the realms that we don't often think about or even talk about when we're designing and developing AI technologies at the corporate and organizational level. So again, thank you for bringing that to us. Now, despite the fact that they're interesting, I mean these are not just interesting. They have important implications on what we do and how we design these systems. So again, thank you for bringing that to our attention. Dr. Michael Sherbert is an Indigenous scholar, a researcher, and a postdoctoral fellow at Queen's University. He's also the author of Deconstructing Transhumanism, a Religion Without Religion. So pick up a copy for a fascinating read. Now, that wraps up another episode of Responsible AI in Action. In each conversation, we speak with leaders across the AI industry and those working on developing enterprise transformation to explore what's actually working. We look at what's working, what's not working, and how to deploy AI responsibly in the real world. Thank you to our audience for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of Responsible AI in Action.